is Dennis Mills, one of the founding members of VFP 109. Of the 25 million veterans currently alive in the United States, nearly 3 of every 4 served during a war or official period of hostility. And about a quarter of the nation's population, roughly 70 million, are potentially eligible for Veterans Affairs benefits, VA benefits, and services because they are veterans, family members, or survivors of veterans. In Washington state alone, 670,000 served in wartime. And tonight we want to provide some critical information during this program on federal benefits for veterans, dependents, and survivors. There is one thing our viewing audience should know about all combat veterans. That is, they are not the same people they were when they were deployed. In addition to physical wounds, there may be many unseen wounds of the soul and the spirit, but there are tremendous resources to help heal these wounds for both the service member and the service member's family, and an ever-growing number of people who truly care and want to help. Our chapter, VFP 109, is among that number. We are a veterans organization that is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, which is educational and humanitarian. We say that we, having dutifully served our nation, affirm a greater responsibility to serve the cause of world peace. And we will work with others towards increasing the public awareness of the cost of war and to seek justice for veterans and victims of war. To help us understand the challenges of filing VA claims, I have 2 very special guests with me. Tonight, next to me is Mark Fleming. Mark Fleming is a Vietnam veteran, a U.S. Army, and an accredited independent claims agent with the VA. And next to him is the person who has made it possible for both Mark and myself to do some VA benefit counseling, and that is Lena Swanson. Lena Swanson is a retired benefits specialist and an appeals. Help us with the title there, Lena.
A retired Veterans Benefits Specialist, an appeals officer, and a National Service Officer for former prisoners of war.
Thank you. And she has over 30 years experience in this field, and she is an advisor to Mark and myself. We do counseling at Coffee Strong, just off of exit 122 on Highway 5. Coffee Strong is where we come on Fridays from 10 to 2, and we talk with veterans as well as we may talk with veterans, active duty as well as the veterans, and they have some very unique needs. And so I want to welcome you to the program tonight. Our program is going to zero in on service-connected disabilities. But there's also a broad range of federal benefits. And before we get into that, Mark, I'm wondering if you'll just lightly touch on some of those benefits that our viewing audience may be aware of, or maybe they may not be aware of.
Yes, I will. One is the Veterans Affairs Healthcare. They provide hospitals, community clinics, community living centers, readjustment counseling centers, a wide range of both physical and mental health counseling for veterans. There are a variety of VA pensions, both for survivors as well as the veterans themselves. Education and training. Many of us remember the World War II GI Bill after after Vietnam, as well as the new GI Bill. All of those are aimed at providing education benefits to veterans. There's also home loans and guarantees, VA life insurance, and finally burial and memorial benefits. So a wide range of veterans
range of benefits, and I know you and I have both benefited from a variety of those benefits.
That's right.
But we're going to focus on veterans with service-connected disabilities. And Lena, who is our mentor, I'm going to ask you to define, because you ask us all the time, but I'm going to let you tell our viewing audience, when we say the term service-connected disabilities, what are we talking about?
The VA considers a service-connected disability to be any physical or mental condition incurred while on active duty or aggravated by active duty that may have lasting effects. Now, what am I talking about, aggravation? We're talking about you could have had a bad knee, injured a knee on active duty. You're being, the VA has rated you for that knee. Now your hip is bothering you. The aggravation, by favoring that leg, the aggravation could cause the hip to go bad, and you could, with medical documentation, get the hip service connected as a result of aggravation. That's basically what a service-connected disability is.
Yeah. Actually, could I add one thing, Lena?
Sure.
There's a definition of it, and essentially what you're looking for is a diagnosis of a current problem, current ailment or disability, and also some incident during the service that could have caused that, and a link between the two. So by establishing those three things, that's the service connection.
Okay, the VA rules say this, that the first 365 days after discharge is considered a presumptive period. If you develop a chronic condition, if you are diagnosed with a chronic condition or if you are being treated for symptoms of a chronic condition, the VA has to assume that it started on active duty. But
Hence the word presumptive.
hence the word presumptive, yes.
Okay. Mark, what are we talking about when we say compensation benefits? Now, we're talking dollars now.
Right.
And some of our viewing audience may not be aware of the amount of money in various kinds of compensation with percentages, and if they're married or if they have children. You know, what are we talking about actually if the VA awards a benefit? What type of money are we looking at?
Okay, well, when the VA says that, yes, you have a problem that is related to your service, time in service, it's service connected, they will also determine the extent of that problem. And that's typically based on the impact it has on your earning capacity. And it can be anywhere from 10% up to 100%. When I say 10%, they would be giving you $123 per month. It goes up in increments. At 30%, it's $376 per month. And at 30%, you can also start getting stipends if you're married, have a child, or a dependent spouse. So the full range can be, if you're 30%, it could be anywhere from $376 to $448, all the way up to 100%, which is, I have it here somewhere, yes, up to $2,932 a month.
Well, in reality, that $2,000, the compensation could go up as high as $6,000 a month.
And how would it do that, Lena?
Well, it's because if you're getting $6,000 a month, that means you can't hardly move. I mean, you're so bad, in such bad shape. But they have to award you that it could go up to that amount.
Now, typically, we're seeing a number of people from the Vietnam era that are getting compensation for PTSD. Mm-hmm. And the ratings have usually been about 30% at that. And what does that mean? The math, I'm an educator, retired now, but it used to be 10 plus 20 was 30.
But not with the VA.
It's not with the VA. So could you sort of explain that type of thing a little bit?
The VA does not pyramid. They want, 3 10s don't make 30. I think 3 10s is you'll get at 20%. It's awful. I mean, it took me about 15 years before I could really understand the comprehension of how and I couldn't explain it to you right now. But 10 and 10 don't make 20 with the VA.
Okay. Now, some of these claims, and let's say that they're valid claims, can actually take up to 2 years before they see money coming through if the veteran doesn't provide critical information when filing. Lena, what type of documents or important documents should veterans have? We need to let our viewing audience know this is what they need to collect so that people like ourselves or others can help them when they file. What documents are we talking about? There's a list of them, actually.
Well, these documents that I'm going to be mentioning, the lack of them is what's causing much of the backlog in the VA, because every time the VA has to come out to the veteran for more information, it'll delay his claim 60 to 90 days. But the most important, of course, is your DD-214, your separation from the military service. That's number one.
And why is that important? Because there are different types of discharges.
Yes, that's correct.
And that's important for benefits.
Well, there's a short form of the DD-214. It does not show the character of discharge, and then there's a long form that shows the character of discharge. A veteran with an honorable discharge is entitled to all the benefits to which he may be entitled. The other is a veteran with a general under honorable condition will be entitled to all VA benefits except for education. If he paid into the Montgomery GI Bill, I understand that that's gone. So the DD-214 is the most important document, and the first thing that veterans should know is never let go of the original, never. He should take it to the local county courthouse.
And register it.
And register it, file it for record, and they'll give him back certified copies. And it's always available to him.
Matter of fact, today, Lena, I looked at my DD-214 for giggles. And there it was, the county courthouse in Snohomish, Washington.
Yep,
It
it
was
really
recorded.
is.
You can always get it.
And if you're married, you need a copy of your marriage certificate. Now, the VA if you can send in a copy, if they doubt the authenticity of that, they can come back and ask you for a certified copy or bring in the original. But documents have a tendency to get lost in the VA. So we don't want to ever turn over an original document if it can be avoided.
And that's especially important when that veteran wants to have compensation for the spouse as well,
Absolutely.
unless they have that marriage certificate. That could be a challenge.
Another important aspect of a married veteran at 30% entitled to a dependent allowance is he or she must establish a legitimate line to his spouse, his or her spouse. So if his spouse or her spouse was married before, we've got to have a copy of their divorce decree or death certificate to show that that's a legitimate marriage. And that divorce decrees has to be on both sides of the marriage, if there are such things. Birth certificates of the children. And any child in the home, whether it's his or her biological child, is entitled to the dependent allowance if it's an adopted one. If it is living in the home and he's financially responsible for that child, he could very well get dependent allowance for that youngster.
And how old can that child be before there's no longer a consideration as a child dependent?
If he is in school, if that child is in school, it's up to the age of 23.
23
That's
now.
the last time I heard, and I think that's still there.
If not in school?
If not in school, it ends at 18.
Okay.
The adoption papers, if the child is adopted, they need those adoption papers. I guess when I'm talking to a veteran, first thing I ask for is their DD-214. Then second thing I ask for is their service medical records. Because we're going to need those records and need to be reviewed by somebody that is experienced and knowing what to look for. What is a chronic condition? Is it going to be lasting? Can it come back and haunt him he or her at a later date? Private health records. If he's been treated by a private doctor, the more complete your records are, your claim is coming into the VA, the faster it's going to work through the system. So, and buddy statements, very, very important, especially if you're in a combat zone and there was no official record of your injury. We have just read recently where the government has acknowledged that our foot soldiers over in Iraq and Afghanistan are carrying, 120,
150 pounds?
Pounds of weight. If you fall, especially if you come under fire and you dive for a ditch.
Yeah, we call that hit the deck.
Hit the deck. You're not thinking about hurting your back or twisting your knee, but later on, that can come back to haunt you.
We're seeing that now at Coffee Strong, and some of these veterans coming to us are 23 to 26 years old, and they're already starting to see some of the problems. And one of the things we ask them, did you carry full body armor and everything? Oh yeah, and they'd be maybe 140 pounds, and we know that they almost had the same amount of weight that they were carrying.
The National Veterans Legal Advisory Group put out a bulletin recently about the credibility when the VA does not believe the veteran, and the use of lay statements. And as Mark was saying earlier, the closer to the event that this buddy can, if he was there when you fell in that ditch or whatever, then he could say on such and such a date, and I was serving with George, and he fell into that ditch, and he was carrying about 150 pounds, and he complained for several days about his leg. That's all he needs to say. He doesn't.
The closer it is to the event, the better it is. 10 years later, it may not carry as much weight.
Well, I disagree, but there's a combat rule, and it's 38 USC 1154D, I believe, and it's in the veterans regulations. This one right here.
This one right over here. Yeah.
This is the law. When you walk into a veterans organization and you want somebody to help you, you look around the room for the reference material. They need up-to-date material. Now, these are the latest rules that are out. The code of Title 38 United States Code are the laws as passed by Congress. And the VA several years ago went back to Congress and said, hey, this is too complicated. We can't understand them. We can't make them work and flow. So Congress approved the Code of Federal Regulations. It's supposed to be broken down and interpreted more simply so that it could be understood.
Right, and they do have the force of law.
They have the force of law. But unbeknown to Congress, the VA also came up with a manual called an M21-1 manual. And that's a third step. So that's 3 steps down from the laws that's passed. But when you walk into the service organization, look around the room and look at their reference material and how up to date it is.
And they come out every year.
They come out every
year. This is
year.
not light reading. I know Mark and I, when you taught us on this, we had some 4,000 pages or
something like that.
I mean, it was a huge amount of stuff. As you can see, they're thick.
They really are.
And it's very thin paper.
Yes, yes.
Learning to be a veterans advocate like Mark has become. He's an independent claims agent, accredited by the VA, accountable to no one but the VA. He doesn't have to belong to any service organizations. He can represent this man, and he can file the claim for him. And if the veteran wants to file an appeal at the local level, Mark is authorized at this point in time. He could charge if he wanted to, just like an attorney can. But coming back to
you mentioned the buddy statement.
Oh yeah.
And Mark, remember we had a veteran where the medical facility was taken out by incoming.
Right.
It was shelled, and all the records were destroyed with it. And this person didn't have any official records, but he did get buddy statements.
And he actually went and tracked that fellow down, and the fellow did write out a statement. I knew so-and-so during basic training, and he didn't have this problem. I remember he had this problem occurred while we were in service. And that was part of the record.
If I had been the service officer on this case in the beginning, I would have quoted the combat rule, which says, in the absence of official documentation, the combat veteran's word must be taken. And that's that 38 United States Code 1154. So he didn't really need all of that, but that was never invoked in this case that they're talking about.
Lena, on buddy statements too, when I got out of the service, then the very next day, my uniforms were given away. I mean, I wanted to forget the period I had. And I forgot all, maybe you had a very similar experience. I mean, it was just sort of, we wanted to forget what we had gone through. But now to get buddy statements, sort of like, where are they? Well, there are social networks available like Facebook where all of a sudden you can start searching to see if you can find people. And And I encourage our veterans that are out in our viewing audience, if they don't have buddy statements and they're trying to file it and they have lost contact, to start using some of these social networks.
And in addition to that, any number of units, regiments have their own websites where people can have sign up. There's a list. I've gone back and seen where my unit in Vietnam has a list of people that I knew in Vietnam. So if I needed to get a statement, I could find those people and ask for it.
Well, and some have reunions too.
Yeah.
My cousin's husband served in Brown Water service, and they have a reunion almost every year where they get together, and so that's a place to get good buddy statements.
When Dennis is talking about brown water, he's talking about the river boats that went up and down the rivers in Vietnam. And dangerous.
And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Matter of fact, let's see, what else do we need to have?
Well, we were finishing up the documents.
But some have already filed with the VA and have lost track. Wouldn't that be an important document to try to get a hold of as their claim document so that we actually know what's happened?
Yes.
If he has lost track of what's going on, he has a right to request a copy of his VA claims folder. The VA claims folder has 3 sides to it. He should request all 3 sides, a copy, and he's entitled to a free one. That should give him all of the VA's decisions and all of the VA exams. It should have a copy of his service medical records in there and any documentation that he has submitted. Everything that he's connected to his claim should be in that folder. And when he gets it, you don't mess around with it. You don't add anything to it. You don't take anything away from it. It's a very, very important document.
And you can build the entire history of the case.
You must have it. You must have it.
Matter of fact, Mark, where do you find the documents to help with some of the people that you represent?
Okay. Well, as Lena mentioned, just going to the regional office where someone filed a claim, we can request that file. That's going to give us a lot. But if you do not have a DD-214, you can get one from the National Personnel Records Center. You can also get your military health records from that. So those are 2 places, and you can, actually you can go online and just inquire how to find military records. It will bring these things up. You can find it that way. If you're looking for various, personal records, birth certificates, death certificates, marriage licenses, there are a variety of places to go. But in Washington, you can go to the Washington Department of Health. They will have the vital statistics like birth and death certificates. But there are also some links to where you can find marriage certificates, divorce certificates, a lot of places, help you find those records. And I would recommend that. That would be doh.wa.gov. And finally, the private health records, you would collect those from your physicians, any of your healthcare providers.
Excellent. If you have served, and I'm talking to our veterans that are out there, particularly our Vietnam era veterans, or if you've served in the Republic of Vietnam, actually you were in country, or inland waterways, and this is important that if you were there between January 9th of 1962 and May 7th of 1975, the following conditions are now service-connected and are associated with Agent Orange. And we're starting to see some of these physical ailments affect our Vietnam veterans. Ischemic heart disease, hairy cell and other B-cell leukemias, type 2 diabetes, prostate cancer, respiratory cancers, and Hodgkin's disease. Veterans may be eligible for disability compensation as well as health care benefits for these diseases that have been recognized as associated with exposure to Agent Orange and other herbicides that were used in Vietnam. And you're familiar with Agent Orange,
Yeah.
were you not, as an infantry person?
It was there. I never actually saw it, but we walked through jungle where it had been sprayed. And if you were in Vietnam, you were probably exposed to it in some way. In fact, the VA presumes that you were.
And you need only be in country one day.
I think setting foot
in
in Vietnam will do it. One thing you might want to add is most recently the VA has added Parkinson's to the list.
Yes.
Some veterans have sought service connection for Parkinson's related to Agent Orange and have been turned down. So if you were turned down previously, you can go back and file. The VA is supposed to go back and revisit those claims, but you would be well advised to do it on your own.
Now, surviving spouses, children, and dependent parents, and I'm going to have Lena talk on that in just a bit, of veterans who are exposed to Agent Orange and they died as a result of these diseases we mentioned with Agent Orange may be eligible for survivor's benefit. I mentioned veterans who served in inland waterways. Mark, we hear the term brown water and blue water veterans. Can you sort of touch on what we mean? Because they're covered under this. It's
Yes.
not like you were infantry in country, but we have brown water and blue water veterans in our viewing audience.
Well, a brown water veteran is someone who served, as Lena said, on a riverboat. They went up the river into small inlets, swift boats, patrol boats, riverine, various kinds of boats going in there. They were in country, they were exposed. Blue water Navy is becoming, I think, more and more recognized that people who are offshore could somehow be exposed to Agent Orange when they did actually go ashore or when their boats came in.
Their ship docked and
Yeah.
so they went ashore.
Well, the thing that you need to be careful with there is they must establish the blue water sailor, because it's been before the court. The court has ruled against the blue water sailor, but if you can establish, if you can prove that you went on liberty or you stepped 1 foot, you have to prove that the boat docked or you went in, one of them boats that takes you in on liberty, but you have to show that. And so that's where your buddy statements come in as well.
Well, and now you can actually get ship records.
That's right.
Some of our veterans have started to say, I served in such a way in the Navy, and I went ashore, but I don't remember when. And I
Right.
said, well, go after the ship's log.
Right.
And he got a hold of the ship's log and found the dates that he wanted. Lena, what should these Vietnam veterans that are in our viewing audience do now that these recent regulations cover these diseases?
Well, I have a stepson who served in Vietnam. He was in the Army. He was on those helicopters that spread the dioxin or the Agent Orange. He's had a heart bypass or a heart stent put in. It's commonly called, I think, coronary artery disease, but the other name for it is ischemic heart.
Yes.
But get those, if he has not been to the VA, if the VA did not treat him, he needs to get those private medical records. Vital. If he's never filed a claim with the VA, there is a form the VA uses now. They're trying it out, that EZ 526, EZ 526. It's an original claim. If you come in with all of your records, the service medical records, the private medical records, this type of thing, supporting your claim for the heart disease or the Parkinson's disease, there must be a diagnosis. You can't just say, hey, I've got it. It doesn't work that way. But the more complete it is coming in, your claim coming in, the faster it's going to go through the system. That's why they have, I think Seattle is one of those regions that is trying this program out.
It's called fully developed claim.
A fully developed claim, and they can
6
get the,
pages now.
Oh, yes, that's fantastic. They can also get a decision back within 90 days, I understand. 90 days to 6 months, which is unheard of.
Lena, you taught us a phrase that we need to get the private medical doctors to use.
Yes.
It is, let's say it, Mark, it is as likely as not.
Absolutely. In my medical opinion, it is as likely as not. The service representative, people like Mark and like Dennis, who are helping a veteran develop his claim, may very well need to draft up the medical statement so that the veteran can show it to his private doctor who knows how, because how you word it is really important. In this case that you were talking about on that remand, very poorly developed by the service representative, because the doctors didn't say what should have been said until way down the line.
Right.
So it's
And
really
that
important.
phrase appears. In my opinion, is it's likely to have occurred.
Right, but that was later, and it should have been earlier. There were other medical statements in there. So when in doubt, check it out. You go on the assumption that the VA didn't well, I don't want to say that. Let's see how it'll be diplomatic.
They didn't have a graduate course?
Right. They did not have a graduate course. The VA can't read your mind. You must be specific. I always worded, when I filed a claim back in my working days, I kept it very simple language, straight and forward and to the point.
Now, Lena, on Fridays at Coffee Strong off of exit 122 Highway 5, Coffee Strong is a GI coffee house. Just about every Friday, you and I are there, and Mark is able to come every other Friday, providing counseling on these various benefits from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Tell us, well, I'm going to switch it over to Mark. Mark, tell us about your involvement of counseling at Coffee Strong. What do you hear? What do you see?
Well, I see a lot of veterans that are confused, uncertain, and really somewhat afraid. They've tried to go to the VA. They haven't quite figured out what the process is. They haven't engaged any of the service organizations. So what we do is we just talk to them about, we listen mainly, but as Lena has told us, we also need to start interviewing those veterans, from head to toe. Find out, they come in with a specific problem. They say, I've got this problem, and then you start asking about what they did. What events happened? Did you have to hit the deck? How many IEDs did you go through? In fact, we had one veteran who said he lost count after 40.
Yeah.
Trying to get a sense of what happened. And I've forgotten the specific case veteran, but we had a guy who came in, and I think he had a claim, I think it was his leg. And by the time we finished interviewing, we could identify 11 different diagnoses that he should pursue. We had another, he was actually active duty, who was in the process of being medically separated. The Army had identified 9 potential.
And only 9.
9 potential
Just
diagnoses.
sign here and you're out.
He also went to the VA, and the VA identified, I think it was 27. So he went back to his medical unit and said, I want to be checked out for these as well. Probably most important, the one thing I've learned at Coffee Strong is I started out thinking I was helping veterans, and we see a lot of active duty. And that's
Yes.
really the time when you need to be assembling these records. Those medical records are there, so if you can get them while you're still in service, that's a plus. You don't have to go through the rigmarole of trying to retrieve them from another source. A lot of times you'll find veterans say that, well, there's some kind of a hang-up. So those are always going to be problems. The more you can come out of the service with, the more documented diagnoses, the stronger your claim will be. And the other thing is, I think that a lot of the people that come in, both veterans as well as service members, don't have a strong feel for what the process is. They know they're entitled to something. A lot of them have maybe general under honorable conditions, so they may not be eligible for education. A few cases we're trying to see if we can upgrade that. One of the things the Army has done over the years is they process a lot of people out for personality disorder.
Yes.
It's an easy way for a commander to get rid of a problem, but it leaves the veteran at risk. And one of the things that you can do is upgrade those discharges if you can show that there were reasons why that occurred. So that would help a veteran be eligible for more benefits. One of the bigger problems we've seen, there's a book that just came out called Lethal Warriors about veterans returning after multiple combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, literally going on murder rampages in the towns in Colorado Springs. And these are guys who are separated out. They have no recourse to benefits, yet they have very, very serious problems that have led to this. So one of the things we try to do is show veterans that there are some alternatives, there are some resources. There's only so much that Dennis and I can do as 2 individuals, but there are other service organizations, there are vet centers, so we at least try to steer them in that direction.
Now, Lena, you've had 30 years of experience, probably up through early Vietnam people, definitely World War II and Korean vets.
And the Persian Gulf, yes.
Yeah, and what have you observed being at Coffee Strong, advising us now and helping us to be better claims agents representing veterans? What kind of things have you seen coming through that might be different for the veteran coming through the system today?
Well, the lack of information is still there. I mean, it was in World War II. They told them to pack up their bags and go home, forget about it, put it out of their mind, and pick up their bag, and get married and have your family and raise your family. They said the same thing in Korea. We didn't discover post-traumatic stress disorder until Vietnam. They called it World War I. They called it shell shock. In World War II, they called it battle fatigue. I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Well, I'm just wondering if you are seeing different types of needs that need to be addressed by the Veterans Administration during particularly Iraq and Afghanistan veterans.
Well, as you know, the traumatic brain injury in the earlier manuals of the Code of Federal Regulations and the Title 38 United States codes, a brain concussion, a mild brain concussion, the effects of it was considered hysteria. Now, they are recognizing the cumulative effect of these IEDs. The multiple concussions can have long-range effects. What do I see differently than I see the damage every bit as bad, but I see it more severe now. These youngsters that have made multiple tours of Iraq and Afghanistan, some of them are so disconnected with society. The only ones they trust are one another, by the way. That's the feeling that I get. But the destruction of you talked about the pain in the soul and the
Yes.
loss of harmony, and the guys don't want to admit it. They don't. That few of them. The combat vet does not normally talk about his experiences. Won't talk about it. The wannabe combat vet, you'll hear him mouthing off all over everywhere. But the guy that's sitting there keeping his mouth shut, and he's been living all these years with the nightmares and the crowd avoidance and the short fuse on the tempers. By the way, and also never associating his back pain and his knee pain with the falls and the dives he took
when he was actually in combat.
When he was actually in combat. But the destruction of their emotional well-being. They went over at young men in young men's bodies, and they came back young men, old men in young men's bodies. And you're right. My experience in the thousands and thousands of interviews that I held over the years, that was never the same. Never the same.
Now, Lena, we're able to provide limited counseling just on Fridays right now. In our viewing audience, one of the things that we do is our program is on Channel 22 in Thurston County, and we're very thankful that we have a program monthly on that. We also put it out on Blip TV, and on Blip TV we can show the specific links to our program by going to our website, which is www.vfp109rcc.org. And if they go there, they can see this particular program later on. We'll have it out on the internet so anyone can watch it. But what if our viewing audience is not able to come to Coffee Strong on Exit 122? They're hearing the program, they're watching the program, they know that they need to get some help in filing VA claims, and we've given them what they need to get, but where can they go to find the Mark Flemings in the world or others who might help them? What are these sources that they could go to?
Well, every veteran service organization, Disabled American Veterans, Vietnam Veterans of America, American Legion, all of those organizations have chapter service officers who are supposed to be trained. Every of the 58 VA regional offices in the United States, one floor is dedicated to a service organization. If you wanted to file a claim, you could go. Those are the professional service officers. The ones who are at the chapter level are volunteers at just doing the best that they can. But I would refer them to the federal building, to a professional service officer, or you could go to the state of Washington Department of Veterans Affairs. And they're located, by the way, in Olympia at 1102 Quince, Quince Street Southeast in Olympia. Or you can call a pager. Well, their telephone number is 360-725-2152. John Lee is currently the director.
Yes.
The state of Washington was the original agency that started post-traumatic stress counseling out in the community. So a veteran did not have to go anywhere near a federal building. That program is still available. A man named Tom Shoemaker out of Olympia handles that. But John Lee and the Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs will be more than happy to assist these people in filing claims.
And also, if I can add, if you just Google Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs, you'll bring up their website, and you can find a lot of this information.
Now, one of the things that we haven't talked about is that as each year we see some of our 225,000 Washington State Vietnam era veterans dying, particularly not only just to age, but to some of the diseases we're talking about. The Veterans Affairs, the Department of Veterans Affairs, we used to call it VA Veterans Administration, but it's Department of Veterans Affairs, has a lesser known Dependency Indemnity Compensation Program, or DIC as we use it. Tell us a bit about that, if you will. Lena and Mark, if you want to jump in, you can too.
Well, a DIC, or Death Indemnity Compensation, is available to a surviving spouse or the dependent children or the dependent parent if they were a member of the household at the time of the veteran's death, for someone who dies of a service-related problem. Now, this new ischemic heart decision that's come out of recently by General Shinseki, the Secretary of the VA, Parkinson's disease, the heart disease, and the various kinds of leukemia. Many veterans have long been dead. The wives may not have remarried, not aware that they may very well be entitled to DIC based on that heart condition that he died from. So they should get a hold of their nearest service organization and file a claim immediately. I've been dealing, and by the way, those presumed conditions that you mentioned, Mark, there are some conditions that are not on there. That case that you sent me about this malignant brain tumor, an aggressive brain tumor, the widow filed, and it went to the Court of Appeals. It was remanded back to the U.S. Board of Appeals. And it was the decision. It was granted. He died of this brain tumor within about 6 weeks.
And they made the case.
They made the case, and good arguments toward that was associated with the exposure to the dioxin, the chemicals. Well, I ran across an old lady out at Costco who lives on minimum Social Security. Her husband died of that very same condition. I found a doctor, by the way, who was familiar with the condition, and he wrote it up for her as likely as not. They denied her, and then I get this case. So the widow is reopening. But the VA is supposed to go back, by the way, and look up these widows and tell them to reapply. But they are so far behind in their claims work and their rating decisions. The word needs to be gotten out to the communities. These widows who have not remarried or who did remarry and are now single again can reapply based on that the first husband's death.
Now, Lena, I heard the word appeals. And often when we talk to our veterans there, we're talking about filing for the first time. But some have, and they get a notice of denial. And they have a certain period of time, do they not?
Yes.
And many of them give up after they get that, oh, well, I don't have a chance. what is the problem if they don't appeal, and what's the time guidelines that we're looking at?
Well, Mark is going through this with this process. The veteran has 365 days. He has 1 year from the date on that letter denying him benefits to file an appeal. It's called a notice of disagreement. Get that in immediately, because if you keep your appeal going, if you're eventually successful, the award has to go all the way back to your original claim.
So if it takes you 10 years to get it, then they will now
go
owe
back
you
to that
10 years
first
worth
year.
of benefits.
Yes, that's correct. And you have to, once you file that appeal, the clock starts ticking. So it's important that you keep that moving and be aware of the dangers of allowing that time to elapse, because once that 1 year has gone, then it's dead.
The decision is final.
That decision is final. In order to reopen that claim, the widow would have to, or the veteran would have to come up with new and material evidence not previously considered. It can't be the same stuff.
And where would they get that new and material evidence that would help
Well,
them?
this is where the buddy statements come in. This is where a private medical doctor's statement could come in, I have reviewed this man's service medical records, and in my opinion, it's as likely as not, that would have to be considered new and material evidence. The case would be considered reopened. He may not be successful, but he should keep on trying.
Yeah. And for an example, we had a veteran who came in who had applied for disability compensation for post-traumatic stress, and it was denied. And then since then, because he's had anxiety attacks, he has gotten health care from the VA, and we have a statement from the VA. Diagnosis, post-traumatic stress disorder. That's new and material evidence.
Yes. In fact, but now comes the question, what, was he a combat veteran? Was he in combat? What stressful event did he witness or experience that would cause him to alter his life, his lifestyle, the fear of death? You don't necessarily have to have been in combat. You've been on board ship and saw a plane crash on the deck and saw somebody hurt, or that could cause traumatic stress.
Right. So again, having a veteran, if he didn't have a combat designation, he would need to describe, or she would have to describe, I did these things. These things happened. I was there. This is how I felt. This is the sense that I had the whole time. And you can write a very articulate letter. The gentleman that we are talking about did that. We filed that along with the PTSD diagnosis.
Now, we often use the terms CIB, Combat Infantry
Badge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we have the Combat Action
Badge.
And there's
Combat
two
Action ribbons, CIB,
There's also a Combat Medic Badge.
Oh, yes, the corpsmen and the medics especially. Yeah. But there's also the Air Force, there's an Air Medal, I believe, that is considered combat. Because the CIBs and those are for ground soldiers, the foot soldiers. But they had the guys that were if you were in the Navy and the ship was entitled to a combat ribbon, you were entitled to whatever that ship was entitled to.
And that's why you mentioned the DD-214. That's where a lot of these things will be documented.
Yes.
Not just their military occupation specialty, but that. Matter of fact, when we used Joint Base Lewis McChord, and because you and I were both previously Army, we often don't think that much about Air Force being in combat areas. But I know that some came into Coffee Strong when we were there, and I was thinking, they don't have any issues with PTSD or whatnot.
We learned different. We
learned very different. We talked about climbing up the telephone poles while they were being shot at, trying to establish communications, so it's similar to what the Army would call signal corps. And we learned that, yes, they are very much combat-related stressors that they have.
And going back in time, in Vietnam, the Air Force are the ones that sprayed a lot of the Agent Orange. It was the Air Force personnel who were loading it on the planes. They were exposed to it.
That's true. Lena, I want you to share in our closing moments what it is from your heart that you want to tell the veterans that are out there watching maybe for the first time and they're hearing about veterans benefits. What is it that you would like to communicate with them?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you those of you who served our country, for protecting me and my family. And to the Vietnam vet, I say welcome home. That's a phrase that wasn't used very much back there in those days. What I'd like to share with you is that you are cared about. There are people who care about you and your well-being. We encourage you to reach out to a service officer. If you won't do it for yourself, think about your family, your wife especially. I was talking to a man the other day who he has Parkinson's disease. He was in Vietnam. He'd never filed a claim. He has coronary artery disease, all of those things, and he's retired military. I told him, he said, well, I took out military survivors benefits. In the event of my death, my wife will get some of my money. And I turned right around and told him, I said, wait a minute. Do you know that her income is taxable? The SBP is taxable, and it's offset dollar for dollar by all the Social Security she's going to get. So if you die of a service-related cause, she not only will get the DIC amount of about $1,100 a month tax-free, but if that amount is greater than her military survivors benefits pension would be, they'd have to give her a refund of all the money you paid into that. And you could just see his eyes start sparkling. You know, he's waking up. Wow, he wasn't aware of that. So to those of you, reach out. Don't sit back. People in the state of Washington especially care about you. And Mark and Dennis are two very wonderful, wonderful men who are volunteering their time. I'm their volunteer advisor, but they are fantastic, far brighter than but there's more work than we can do.
Thank you, Lena. I appreciate that. Mark, about a minute or two.
Well, I would tell them also that to make sure that they understand the process, they think about what benefits they might be eligible for, and really not to give up, not to assume that just because you're turned down once. One of the lessons I learned in public administration school was in the public sector, there really is never a final authority. You can always appeal. And with the VA, you have a whole line of appeals. And I would encourage you that if you filed a claim and been turned down, continue to pursue it, as Lena had said.
I want to thank our viewing audience for being with us during the Veterans Hour for this very important topic, perhaps the most important topic that we've covered so far, and that is how to file successfully for Veterans Affairs benefits. And this program is coming to you through the courtesy of Thurston Community Television, Channel 22, but it'll also be later shown on Blip TV. And we want to thank our viewing audience. And I want to thank the crew that they're all veterans, and thank you.
And to their futures